delivered to you. So without further ado, let's first start with our very first session for this afternoon. So the first topic that we're going to talk about is navigating through the evolving media landscape in the Philippines. And to talk about that is no other than one of my friends, Don Oliver Abiera. Now, let me quickly introduce him. Don is an advocate and a nation builder who's been volunteering and working for the development sector for 8 years. He's a graduate of the International Studies program with cum laude honors in Ateneo de Davao University and studied environmental preservation and peace building program under the Philippine Youth Leadership Program in Northern Illinois University. Most importantly, in 2017, he joined the ASEAN Youth Workshop on Media Literacy that changed the course of how he looks at the digital world and solves problems with it. And the year after that, he founded an organization built to give opportunities and create a network of youth advocates in a wide range of advocacy. We know this organization and the MIL field as Yabong. So as the founder and executive director of Yabong Philippines, he spearheaded partnerships and collaborations with local, national, and international organizations. Right now, he became the incumbent youth coordinator for Asia and the Pacific for UNESCO-led Media and Information Literacy, or MIL Alliance Committee. So let's all welcome to talk about navigating the changing media landscape in the Philippines. Let's give the floor to Don Oliver Abiera. Hi, Ollie.
Hi, thank you so much, Gab, for that very generous introduction. Allow me to share my screen and work through this speaking engagement. Hello, everyone. I know you're from different parts of the Philippines, but I'd like to know first, where are you from? So if you can put in your chat, in the chat box, where are you from? That would be great. As we go along the way, I'll read some, I have some questions and interact with you through chats, but yeah, I'll start off. So first of all, when I was like asking myself, you know, when I was tasked to do this speaking engagement, I thought to myself, like, what does it mean to navigate through a new landscape in media? What does it mean for us as millennials, Gen Zs? And what does it mean to the changing world? So I was trying to navigate through all my thoughts, gathering all of that. Then I realized I just need to look at what I am doing right now. I was doing during that time and realize how much it impacts the world that we're doing. So it was actually because of an instant noodles. Such a weird way to start a speaking engagement, but I'd like to share a story when I was in 2009. That's where Facebook started, and I was elementary back then. You can backtrack and know my age by just saying that I was in sixth grade during that time. And my teacher, who actually passed away few years ago, told me that we're getting a little bit lazy in this world, and that this generation has become obsessed with everything instant, like instant noodles, like how in the middle of the night I realized, and all of my thoughts lingering over this speaking engagement, or how I realized that this story and that specific thing that is happening right now to me is actually, you know, is actually what describes our generation today and the new emerging landscape. How instant shopping has been a click for all of us, Shein, Shopee, Lazada, and even instant, Food Panda. And instant gratification, wherein sometimes we forget that we're in it for a long run because of the idea that I deserve this, or that I earned it, so I need to quickly gratify myself. We're a generation that is this best described by other generations as an instant generation, quick to dismiss an idea. That is why this is the title, or living in an instant, how we can create, by living in an instant, a credible and safe information space. Not only navigating the landscape, but also understanding how we can do it, or how we can make sure that we're yielding a credible and safe information space as creators, as influencers, and as merely just citizens of the social media, or netizens. Let's start first with like how generations describe us. We're actually somehow quick to dismiss ideas. We see that with um, unfaltering changes in social media, how different opinions can clash through, and how different political beliefs has been a point of political discussions on social media. There is a monopoly of the truth that we're saying, and how we quickly stereotype other people. Let's say how we describe the Karens, the Patricias, and we're actually also some of the generation that is quick to dismiss or quick to give unsolicited opinion and cancel others. If they don't fit in our opinion, if they don't fit on our thought bubble, we usually resort to cancel culture, which is somehow what you know other generations really describe us as a generation. We're also quick to put pressure on ourselves. We're not only just looking at how these interactions are in outside, but also internal. We take for granted our mental health, and we put unnecessary timeline for ourselves that by 20 I should be graduating, by 25 I should get married, not knowing and not realizing that all of these things are actually coming through that idea of wanting to have instant interactions, instant gratification, and instant results of what we're trying to do. It all spurs with the fact that we are a generation obsessed with everything instant. Now we see that the paradigm shifted from traditional to online classes, to traditional business to digital businesses, even traditional way of dating. We shifted that to our way of life. In itself, there's a paradigm shift, and we know that in itself as a change is a long and painful process, and it's not instant. So we see problems spurring from both um, ways to look at it. First is looking at it in the intrapersonal level. Um, it's our relationship with ourselves, our introspective perspective on things as we go along the way, as we try to make sense of the paradigm shift that is happening right now. Navigating through this landscape or this new paradigm shift is very essential in terms of intrapersonal or your relationship to yourself. That is why I'm giving out different talking points to essentially capture what intrapersonal relationship and how we can go over the problem of being a quick instant generation, and what are our strengths as also a quick instant generation. First, let's start with mindset. Mindset is such a millionaire. You When you go to class, say for example, or when you go to a meeting, you have to have the right mindset when with this paradigm shift. You go to a webinar such as this masterclass with your undivided attention. You're not doing anything on the side track, because understanding that giving yourself an undivided attention and not quickly get into like your TikTok just because it gives that instant gratification of attention, and it's just only a 1 minute video at most or 3 minute video at most that really gets into your attention. You can just scroll and just change your perspective. you know, there was this one professor who actually inculcated in our minds that sometimes you just need to focus on the game right thereafter. Any football player, since it's a relevant topic, since we have the FIFA World Cup semifinals, she said that one specific player, forgot who that was, he just needs to focus on the game for 60 minutes or for however long um in one time, and that's just what they're going to focus on, or what he's going to focus on. And in itself, it changes our perspective on how to mindset our the paradigm shift. Let's say for example you're in class, and the paradigm shift have been different in terms of its landscape, or just catching up with your friends, either online or physical. Sometimes as a quick instant generation, we tend to have our cell phones as easier access and just scroll through everything just because of the fact that it gives that instant gratification. So your mindset should be shifted to giving undivided attention to whatever it is your focus. and leewing away from that instant, quick generation or mindset that we have. Next is discipline and professionalism. Many of us, we tend to procrastinate a lot. And it's not only just the paradigm shift that we're looking right now, but it's because of the fact that we are so engrossed with quick instant gratification, we're able to have that type of mindset. But in terms of like navigating through the landscape, it actually works to procrastination um, as looking at it as the root of all evil. Now that information is readily available, it feeds us with our instant gratification or instant, search in Google of all the things that we need to know. But we are in a generation that is the most educated, get the most or the least paid, actually. So, in order to have that degree of discipline and professionalism, you'll be able to navigate through the new landscape or digital landscape in a way that you'll understand that professionalism really works a long way. So, you show how you disciplined and determined you are by showing that you're not in an instant gratification or you're not giving into that instant gratification. Uh, Next thing is compartmentalize. Um, when you try to manage your time as a professional and also advocacy, I think everyone can or the speakers can relate about it. You have your own daytime job. You say you're an influencer or content creator, or you're also a mother, or you're also a father, you're a son, you're a daughter to your parents. When trying to see things through in an instant generation, or like in an instant or in the new digital landscape, when you try to compartmentalize, you'll be able to see that all people are multifaceted. They're not just simply an influencer, they also have layers of themselves. And when you compartmentalize that, your public, your private, or even your super private love life, these are all making sense to get out of the instant generation or the instant mindset, because we are able to see through people as a multi-layered, multifaceted person. I do this in a different way. Like how I interact with friends is very different to what I interact in the public, because I have a reputation or like a branding and image that is being projected on the public as a speaker, as an advocate, and you as influencers and content creators can relate to your persona, your niche, your audience that you're trying to work with or you're trying to entice with your content. You realize that you're already a multifaceted person. So we need to realize that in order to delve deeper in the digital landscape, you should be able to compartmentalize who you are as a public figure and as a private person. And then you realize that other people are also compartmentalizing who they are as a public and a private person. Next is interpersonal also works with data privacy. When you know yourself, when you know what you um, have to share, because we're not only producers of media or information, we're also consumers of it. What we consume is actually influence what we produce. So in order for you to enable data privacy or even just privacy in general, you need to make sure that all of your personal things should be coming into the idea of compartmentalization. You compartmentalize what you can share in the public and what you cannot, because sometimes it can be used against you. Talk about how anyone can access in any information about you online. And that's scary because there are personal information, cards, passports that they can just, search, and there are black markets and also like hackers who can do that to you. Everyone is vulnerable to harassment, predation, cyberbullying, and that exposure in itself, you need to know your relationship with yourself and how you compartmentalize and get privacy over what you share online, both in public sphere and private sphere. In that case, you should protect yourself. And if you find that someone is abusing an information about you, like blackmailing, cyberbullying, then it's time to take action. There are protection under law that you need to know for yourself to protect yourself in your intrapersonal relationship, to allow yourself to be protected over these as we navigate through the digital landscape and the paradigm shift. Well, let's talk about social media consumption as well. As content creators and influencers, I think we have this idea that we are entitled to speak about what we are passionate about and how, you know, owning our truth. But in terms of your content, say you are ranting or you're talking about something you're passionate about, you need to own your truth. You need to embrace it, your opinions, but know that there are also appalling opinions or there are different opinions than you, and others hold that truth too. When you talk about multifacetedness of truth, it's not a single it's not a single opinionated factor in terms of social media consumption. You need to see through different perspectives, and sometimes we are so caught up with our thought bubble or our own bubble in social media that we cannot anymore see through the different opinion and respect it. Well, there are opinions that needs to be called out for, especially if it hurts a lot of people or if it affects other people. But you need to know that in consuming social media, you need to own your truth, but respect what other owns too. That's why when we cancel people, that's why I don't believe in cancel culture, because that person, as I've said, in their intrapersonal, they are multi-layers. They're not only content creators, they're not only influencers, they're also brothers, sisters to their siblings. They're also friends, they're also advocates, As a person, we're multi-layered and um we're not just boxed with one opinion. And that also believe in character development, which all of us go through and change our opinion out of. Let's go now to consuming information as we go along the way. So media and information is like working hand in hand in how this digital landscape can go through. So when you consume media, you also consume information. And that is why it's very important that we that we actually know if we're consuming the right information. And you can see all of the simple tips that you as a person in your own bubble, in your own intrapersonal relationship with yourself, or your relationship with yourself, to know how conspiracy theories are being built out, the difference between opinion and fact. And that in itself, with all of these things that I've mentioned, um, which is on mindset, which on discipline and professionalism, compartmentalization or compartmentalize, data privacy, social media consumption or media consumption, and information consumption. These are all digital landscape go-tos or talking points that really looks at your relationship with yourself. Because before we can actually create and yield credible information space or safe information space, we need to look at ourselves, our relationship with ourselves, before we can directly navigate through the second way to look at the problem of instant and quick generation. And that is through our interpersonal communications or interpersonal relationships. It describes as your relationship to others, your relationship to your circle or your family, friend, our relationship to our community. Let's say your school, when you're in school, or your teachers, or your co-influencers, co-creators, co-advocates, neighborhood, and stuff like that. And your big relationship or the bigger picture, our relationship to our society, to our religion, to our citizenship. You know, a lot of things in this interpersonal really plays out. We tend to mislead ourselves with our friends because we wanted instant connection or I can feel the vibes, I can feel the mood, I feel connected with this person because of the fact that we choose our peers. That's something that we can choose. And the fact that we are in a digital landscape, we miss out on the physical contact part. So there are confrontations, there are ghostings, there are, I'm not going to reply because this person doesn't give off the vibes. So there are a lot of things that we see through interpersonal, and we see that problems, web out, like how we cancel people, how we don't like this person because this is her digital persona. But again, the idea is coming through the intrapersonal perspective of digital lands, or in navigating through digital landscape. Any person has its own digital persona, but there are layers of identity coming from that. So you cannot just box or stereotype a person just because of one interaction or different interactions that lead us to believe that they are this type of person. Let's also take a look at, say, you're an influencer, a content creator that's also studying. Let's take a look at your relationship with your teacher, say, for example. Let's give it at that, because media information literacy is big on education, and education is something that we really push through. And your relationship with your teachers actually just blossom during the traditional way, or the physical face-to-face classes. Now that we're looking at hybrid way, a lot of them are actually undergoing changes, and a lot of trial and error in the process. Or let's say it's everyone else, even those who are different generation, the not millennials and Gen Z people are struggling to undergo these changes from the paradigm shift or the new emerging landscape in digital platforms. And yeah, you are entitled to talk about that, or to talk about these teachers. You can give your feedback. You can um, try to interact with them, but know that in this relationship with others, may it be in different generation, that you need to be kind, because sometimes we want instant answers as an instant generation. I know a lot of teachers who always say that their students ask them via messenger all the questions, and they try not to reply, because it's not the type of platform that should be all about uh, professionalism, or like it's not the platform that is supposed to be where they're asking for their grades, or for their you know um, for their academics. So in order to look at our interpersonal relationships in digital landscape, and beyond just it, also in physical, let's just say hybrid type of landscape, you need to also take a look at your intrapersonal. And in order for that um to to blossom and to understand, and in order for us to navigate through, and at the same time, as influencers, content creators, advocates, we create and yield credible and safe information space, there are just some things that I wanted to emphasize. We need to be quick. As a generation, we are quick, we're instant, right? But as much as there are bad things about it, there are also things that that we are described as a quick generation, and that is, we're also quick to learn, adapt, and win. And that is the best thing about this generation. We are so quick and instant to learn, and in order for us to yield that safe and credible information space and to navigate through that new digital landscape, we can do these things, or these are the things that really matters, or in terms of creating a safe and credible information space, and at the same time, how we navigate through this digital landscape. First is taking a pause and step back and looking at the bigger picture. The instant mentality gets us to see the short run, like the instant gratification, or the opinion that this person told or posted in social media, you characterize them right away. But in terms of taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, you'll realize the lesson in interpersonal relationship, or intrapersonal rather. You see that they're a multi-layered person, that they're not only influencer, or they're not only the person who spurted or said this opinion or posted this opinion on social media. They're also, a lot of layers of their identity. And whenever you post something, or when as influencer or content creator, this advice of taking a step back or taking a pause and looking at the bigger picture is also something that you need to consider or you need to take in mind, because if you will post in social media, you'll try to think, am I contributing for the good or for the bad? Second is to always know that we are all struggling. Yours is not a special case. No matter how much social media glorify us as someone who has your own uniqueness, we're all struggling. We are above and beyond ourselves and looking at the society and how it changes the digital landscape. You might feel alone in the battle, but trust me, you aren't the only one. No matter how much it looks perfect in social media, and as influencers, content creators, and advocates, you can relate to that. There are things in life that we keep private and that we're struggling with. That is why always choose kindness above all. That's the basic and general rule in life. This is what you want to be known for: your decency, your kindness. Be kind, especially if others can't. Because I've seen a lot of people who are not really good at conversing in social media platforms. Once they have encountered people who has differing opinions with them or polarizing opinion from them, like they're on the both end of spectrums when it comes to opinion. But choosing kindness, choosing the soft to be the softer one, and being able to share something to them, that choosing kindness, it generally speaks of your own character, your intrapersonal, get manifesting in your interpersonal relationships. To conclude, to create a safe and credible information space, we should all take a step back, or take a pause, step back, and look at the bigger picture, to know that everyone is struggling and that isn't only unique to you. And also to choose kindness wherever you go. And that is the friendly reminder from our own organization, how we always try to put digital safety as a use to use conversation. That is why we don't emphasize on formalizing type of like leadership camps and mentorship programs that we are doing in our organization. And just quickly, I wanted to introduce our organization for you to get to know us. And at the same time, um, we can see to ourselves how we can create a safe and credible information space. So, yes, stop living in an instant world. That's just a friendly reminder from all of us. And to and when you do um, get in an instant gratification, you need to understand that there are strengths and weaknesses on that. But all throughout the spectrum of different things that you look at in an instant world, you'll need to understand that intrapersonal and interpersonal relationships really take part in working together to create a safe and create a safe and credible digital and information space. And that is one big way to navigate through the new landscape. So I'm just going to quickly introduce Yabong, which is Youth Advocates Building Opportunities and Network and Governance. We operate in three-tier solution, which is think, embark, and create. Start off with think, where we always try to look media information literacy as an essential 21st century skill or transversal competencies, meaning it has its own universality on how you can apply it. You can apply it with your advocacy on feminism or digital sexuality education, or even your environmentalism, varying on its own advocacy. Once you use different platforms to navigate through your advocacy or what you're trying to work with in your life or you're passionate about, media information literacy becomes essential through as a tool or as an education or as a knowledge or a body of knowledge that works for you not only in digital landscape but also in traditional ones. So what we do is that we do digital camps or even mentorship programs, even physical ones. We partner with different organizations such as Department of Education, which we did the DepEd TV, and we also work with different um, ProMill, because that's our flagship project, or Project MIL. It's actually a combination of promoting MIL in schools, organizations, and um, in cities in the Philippines. We also, since we have the knowledge of like inculcating in the minds of young leaders in our mentorship programs, we try to embark this knowledge to different communities through our digital campaigns, and also partnerships with different national and international organizations. One of it is DepEd Philippines, which we had DepEd TV episodes on OKKK Tambayan. Part of it is tackling disinformation, fake news, and digital safety. Also with Sir Pao before, which is on Televivo from the National Council for Children's Television, which is on Televivo, which is a media literacy seminar for workshop for children, which inculcates the power of making sure that we're also a community. We're embarking this knowledge not only to this exclusive circle that we are doing in Project MIL, but also in the public eye, or in the public sphere. And lastly, we need to create and foster dialogue and collaboration within these communities. Because the knowledge of media information literacy would be futile without the application of it when we create dialogue and foster collaboration within this community. That is why we're working together as MIL advocates to work and create this media information literacy community. And we work through, with different organizations and different summits. And actually, just to quickly navigate through this idea, we are creating this community to foster digital safety. I myself, no matter how knowledgeable and safe we think we are in social media, ill-meaning people can still see through the cracks. And one of it actually was me being hacked in Instagram. And in itself, really just, take your perspective on how digital safety is not only an intrapersonal relationship, it's not only within you, but also in creating that community of digital warriors, or digital media information literacy advocates, or literates, working together to create that safe community. And then there's a lot of work to do. One of it in digital safety, one of it in fake news, information disorders, and all throughout these packages of like problems within media information literacy sphere. It works when we work together as a digital community. We also held international summit, which is one of it is the International MIL Youth Virtual Summit. And all throughout our model of like working with Yabong, we have initiated 3 digital campaigns, unique social media accounts reached 600,000. We had 48 trainings and workshops conducted, over 4,000 youth participants reached, empowered, and capacitated across 16 countries worldwide. And we're just beginning to realize the power of these projects and how we can ensure a safe and credible information space. And yeah, I think that's it. All throughout this talk, I believe covering as a content creator and influencer, and as an advocate for digital community and transforming that digital community into a safe and credible one, is making sure that we as ourselves in our intrapersonal relationship knows, or we know our rights, what we can do, and talk through all the talking, or walk through the talking points that I've established and shared with you, and use it in our interpersonal relationship in order to navigate safely, credibly, and credibly in this information, in this information space, or in this new digital landscape. Thank you, and padayon sa pagyabong.
Hi, Ollie. Thank you so much for that very insightful discussion. We learned a lot about the navigation of the media landscape now, because apparently we have actually witnessed, we are the generation that witnessed a lot of the changes from the traditional media to digital media. And of course, even in the digital media, it's constantly evolving, diba? There used to come like a time when it was still traditional to a certain extent, because like yes, we have a transition to digital, but like the traditional media outlets are still really controlling the um production of the media. Like the Inquirer, for example, they're still the biggest spaces or names in the digital world. And I'm pretty sure as well that our participants here have a lot of questions to ask to Sir Ollie Abiera. So why don't you guys use the chat button, use the chat option to ask Ollie for any question relating to his topic about media and information literacy and navigating through the changes in this industry. Do we have any questions? So Ollie, while we're waiting for the questions that are from the participants, why don't we ask you, what do you think is the most important thing that we have to watch out for in the next few years in this highly evolving landscape? I mean, we've talked about the evolution, of course, and of course, we've talked about the basics, right? Like making sure that we have digital security and things like that. But what do you think will be the biggest changes that we will see in the next few years, in that at least in the MIL space, and at least probably in the Philippine scene?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because to be completely honest with you, it's hard to pinpoint a specific trend that is going on right now. But I think there are two things that I'd like to highlight on the changes of what will be happening in the next few years. First is that the society will become more engrossed with accountability. We see it right now with different movements, such as the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and we see this change of movements and you know different perspective that is breaking through the traditional ideas or philosophies that we currently have. Second is the inevitable death of democracy, because the thing is, we democracy lives on the idea that people can access information anytime, and also can produce and consume information. But in a hyper society that can do a lot of things in social media, accountability plays a big role in making sure that this idea or this um, unlimited use of opinion and information that we can access can also be regulated. So when we talk about accountability, there's a responsibility to also regulate it. So as we go along the way of changing the society into a more accountable one, there is a need and a call for regulation. And I think in democracy with that one, it will not deteriorate, as I said, but I would say there will be an enhanced idea, and there will be more balance in terms of being able to produce information, consume information, and at the same time regulate it. Because it's not actually a question of accessibility or usability of media platforms nowadays. It's the question of regulation over these media and information platforms.
Thank you, Ollie. Of course, again, we encourage our participants to drop questions to Ollie while still here. But I want to piggyback on that idea on the role of regulation. And obviously, we're going to be, like what you said, we're going to be seeing more regulatory policies probably in the next few years. Or what kind of regulation are you foreseeing to happen? Who should actually regulate the media production and consumption at the very least? Do we have a source of truth, or is it the wisdom of the crowd? What's your idea on regulation?
That is a tough question, because there's no way to answer that, but because of a mental model that we have, that if it's about regulation, it's always about the government. But if you think about it, actually, one cannot hold the monopoly of the truth, except if it's a fact-based truth, say, for example. So it's really hard to see, because there is no framework or model right now that really works or that really establishes the best practices on how to regulate media and information platforms. So I would say, let's see in the next few years. I don't have an answer now, and I have to be honest with you that no mental model or no framework that I can see right now that really essentially works with. But I think it's a hybrid of making those stakeholders, say government regulation, people, or the wisdom of the crowd, and also external parties coming together and ideate on the best practices to regulate these media and information platforms.
Thank you, Ollie. So now we finally have a question from our participants. One question came from Carlo Miguel. He is asking about wait, let me just quickly read the entire phrase here. How can we properly engage in our advocacies in relation to media activities while we're taking care of ourselves, since there are contents and there are opinions of others that can affect our well-being negatively?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think I've learned this one through a book. Um, I forgot which one. Is it, I think, Atomic Habits or, yeah. So there we have triggers. So, we need to cut the triggers. That's why we unmute certain people, we block certain people, we delete social. Like, say, for example, what I do is that I'm active in social media, in all social media platforms. But what I do is I cut the trigger. So, say, for example, I deleted my Facebook app for me to navigate through the Safari, for me to it's harder for me to navigate in Facebook. And then when you use the Safari app instead of like Facebook, you cut off the instantaneous feeling of like getting through Facebook and scroll, and and same with TikTok. So I only watch TikTok when my friends send it to me. Sometimes I don't also see, or I don't also watch all of those. So know your triggers and cut off that trigger with how you impulsively do it. It's all about self-regulation. I agree with you, Anne Jamie Robles, which said yes to self-regulation, because what you consume is actually self-explanatory on how you think as a person. But also know that, sticking through that thought bubble, through that bubble of like opinions and thoughts, like will also hurt you. So it's also good to navigate through different spectrum of opinions and understand that your own truth does not hold monopoly of your experiences and what you're doing. So that, I think, is how one way you can do it. And I actually did it because I did it 5 years or 4 years ago. And a lot of people ask me how I can still be really confident with myself, even though there are a lot of things. There's a multitude of people trying to set you up in a standard of your, say, just beauty in itself. Understand that I have vitiligo, which is in my face, which is not in any part of my body, which made me a lot of insecurities growing up because of social media. So I made the trigger stop and made myself work with myself that I won't be engrossed with the opinion of other people just because they say that having a perfect skin, having the perfect face is one way to say that you're beautiful, because we all are beautiful in different ways. And tending to that trigger, I always have that thoughts when I open social media. So that in itself, cutting through that trigger and learning that all through those years is what makes it easier for me to look at myself in a different perspective.
Thank you, Ollie. That's very inspiring. And I love what you said about controlling your triggers. Also, me personally, I also had to uninstall Facebook for quite some time because it's also one of my triggers. And I think there's an ending need for you to just, scroll all the time. So thank you for that piece of advice. Now let's jump to the next question from Max. With regulation, what do you think about self-regulation mechanisms like citizen press councils? Cebu has a citizens press council, although it has been somewhat inactive lately. Max, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. You spelled it out like Cebu City Peasants. So that was the question, Ollie. What can you say about this issue on self-regulation
Oh,
mechanisms?
it's actually a good model, but it needs social legitimacy. Like, people needs to recognize you, because self-regulating councils or such as mechanisms like that, it needs to be anchored with legitimacy over people. And that is why I think it dies down, because when people do not recognize that, it's harder for you to penetrate this, accountability. Because, one way to counter absolute power or majority power, say in a democracy, it's majority. In an absolute monarchy, absolute power is only through numbers. And if you don't have the social legitimacy to verify, regulate other people, or even call out fake news or disinformation, it also loses interest over you, or loses your legitimacy as a self-regulating mechanism or self-regulating council. So legitimacy, and you can understand that in a theory by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which is the social contract theory. You'll see that people are, social in being. We tend to we tend to create as a community. But what makes states or countries right now regulate people is because of that sense of social legitimacy. We recognize that there is a government, that the Philippines exists because of taxes, because of regulations. And on that social contract theory, legitimacy of state or countries are existing because we regulate ourselves with it. We accept that there is such thing as the Philippine regulations, there are Philippine laws and Philippine taxes. So yeah, social legitimacy, I think, is the lacking there in that model or mental model framework.
Thank you so much, Ollie. Do we have one last question or are we good na? So just let me know, guys. While waiting, no, let me ask Ollie one final question before while waiting for the final question from our participants, since we still have time. Ollie, what would be, because we're talking about the content creators here, the influencers, and of course you mentioned a lot about not encouraging cancel culture and things like that. What do you think is the ultimate cross section of media literacy and influencers on the lens of, should influencers be active flag bearers of media literacy? Should they even take on that kind of responsibility? Or should they just be active collaborators in the space, using their social media good, your influence for social media good? How do you envision their role in shaping the future of the Philippine media landscape, and most especially MIL as well?
Oh, that's a great question, Gab, because in order for us to do it, we can envision it. We can see influencers and content creators be fact checkers, say, for example. But the main struggle here is that we are only few in media information literacy circle. The battle is so big and the warriors are so small in numbers. So we need to have strength in numbers. And to be completely honest with you, I am not doubting the vision of and the role of influencers and content creators, but what I am doubtful of is our capacity to influence these influencers and content creators. Because let's just say, people are not that interested to, like, fact check, because they're only interested to, like, say, if you're a lifestyle influencer, a travel influencer, you're only, you're niche down to, like, what this audience wants to see or wants to look or wants to hear about your content. So honestly, if you take a look at it, incorporating media information literacy is just one way to encourage these influencers and content creators. And the only battle that we need to face right now is making sure that we are strong in numbers and there are bigger influencers that will encourage other small influencers to do the same. Because what I realize in social media is no one really breaks the cycle. When a big influencer does it, all small influencers will actually um, follow it. Let's take, for example, virality, how TikTok trends has been really a big thing. How, one music or one trend can be used by one big influencer or one big celebrity influencer, and how others can do the same. So, once we start this strength, this virality, once we use that as an edge for us to work with these influencers, then we can have the strength in numbers. People are more getting woke about it. So it's not a problem of vision of the role of these influencers and content creators, because they're essential part we can have a lot of media information literacy advocates, but if we don't have the trend, we don't have the bandwidth to work with that system, or to navigate through and pulse through that big archetype of social media platforms, then our battle is a losing battle. It's an uphill battle for all of us. So these influencers are essential to get us to the strength in numbers, to get us in that community. And I think we need to understand that working with these youth influencers and content creators are really essential to work through the media information literacy landscape.
Thank you, Ollie. Yes, very full discussion. And we love what you said about the increasing role of our content creators here, our influencers as well, who will help us in terms of building our fact-checking community and this community of vigilance over promoting media literacy in the Philippines. Now, thank you so much, Ollie, for that very, very good insights. We're pretty sure our participants learned a lot from this talk. So before you leave, let's flash the certificate of recognition and appreciation for your efforts for coming here. The certificate is proudly presented to Don Oliver Abiera for sharing his invaluable knowledge and expertise on navigating the evolving Philippine media landscape during the Media Civics Lab live masterclass on media and information literacy, given this 10th day of December 2022 in Manila, Philippines, signed by yours truly, Gabriel Leones, the founder and president of Break the Fake movement. Thank you so much, Ollie. We appreciate your help and effort, of course, in promoting MIL here in the Philippines.
Thank you as well, Gab. It's a pleasure to work with different influencers and creators. At the same time, all of the organizations who really work through this uphill battle that we have to face.
Yes, thank you so much, and see you around, Ollie. I hope you content creators and influencers will follow Yabong in their social media accounts. You can look up Yabong Philippines in Facebook, Instagram, and many other different channels. They are very active in promoting media and information literacy in the Philippines. And they even have a lot of programs. So you can even sign up on some of those volunteering programs they're actually running. Now, off to one of the most exciting parts of our program is, of course, the weekly games. And of course, I want to hand this over to our resident game host, game master here in Break the Fake movement, Paulo Miguel Ordonio, to give us our very exciting game for today. Go ahead, Pao.
Hello everyone. Magandang hapon po muli sa ating lahat. Apologies for my voice this afternoon. But still, even I'm having a hoarse voice, still let's have fun. Let's take a break from that wonderful discussion. Yeah, I hope everyone's learning a lot, because ako man din po ay still learning a lot about what we are doing when it comes to media and information literacy. And while I am flashing our screen, please, everyone who wants to join, you can join via chatting your responses later. But if you need to go for a CR break, or you need to grab some coffee or snacks, feel free to have it. So for a while, ayan. Okay. Ito na siya. For a while, naglolo ko ang aking screen. Okay. Okay, I'll be now sharing our screen. So everyone, crumble the scrambled game. Guess the word from the scrambled letters. I'll do the full screen. Okay. Naglolo ko siya ng full screen. This interface na lang. Okay, so what are we going to do? Here's our beginning mechanics. Okay. You will be shown a set of letters. Try to arrange the letters toward a word. Type in the correct word at our chat box. Okay? First one, if the correct word will be given 1 point. Again, player with the highest points wins. So again, we will be delivering a Media Civics Lab merchandiser to our winners. So is everyone ready? Can I see the chat box? Can you type the letter MIL in our chat box. If you are ready, let me see our keyboard warriors. Okay, I think everyone now is ready. Our tech team will be our judge to see who will got the first word. Okay, so let us now commit. Are you ready to play? Let's play it now. Okay, what is the word? Okay, give 5 seconds more, and the correct word is. Okay, looking at my the correct word for this is copyright, and A Basco got the correct answer. Let's move forward to the next. What word is this? Okay, that's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the correct word is India. The one who first got the correct answer is Maiko Aperocho. Okay, next. What word is this? You just need to unscramble the letters to figure out our magic word. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the right answer is information. More Matias got the right answer. Next word. What word is this? Yan, may nag-comment na dito. Sabi ni Rahim, kalaro ang matina ang net. I apologize for that. But kung kaya natin umabol, habol tayo. And the word for this is literacy. Let us see the first one who got the correct answer. It's Maiko again. Next word. What word is this? Figure out by numbering the letters of the word. And 5, 4, 3, 1. And the right word is reason got by Florites Gonzalez. Okay. Am I right? Yeah, Florites got the first word. What word is this? Some of the words will be discussed in our second and third session. So I hope you will still got it while we are waiting for our succeeding sessions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the correct word is infringement, which got correct by Michael again. Next word, what word is this? Let us see. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct word is privacy. And privacy, Amor Matias got the right answer. What word is this? Let us see. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct word is behavior. Behavior got the right answer by Maiko again. What word is this? Ayan. Natin, kung sino mauuna sa chat box who got the correct word. It was discussed on our last week session. And the correct word for this is footprint. Footprint by first, the response is Akbado Asan. Next, what word is this? Ayan. Medyo confusing ba? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the correct word for this is etiquette. Maiko again got a point for getting the right word. So that's the end of the game. So I'll be just looking at the next response. Who is the winner of the game? Ayan, ayan, ayan. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And the winner for this game is no other than Maiko Demi. Congratulations for winning our game. Please expect a chat from me so that we can process the delivery of her prize. Back to you, Gab.
Thank you, Pao. So, one of the most pressing questions ng ating mga participants is ano nga ba exactly ang tinutukoy namin sa merch items ng Media Civics Lab? So, it's actually a box, guys. So, it looks like this. And it contains our merch items like this one, the mug, and then the pins, and of course, the lanyard, and then a custom t-shirt. So here you go. So every box, every winner of the game receives a customized package from Media Civics Lab team delivered to you in the Philippines wherever you are. So it's not just for Metro Manila based trainers. It's for everybody. So of course, I know that you guys are so excited na ba lahat sa second session. We want to give you guys some time to like go to the restroom, give yourself some health breaks, like probably 1 to 2 minutes, and then come back here for another learning. While you're doing that also, let me just quickly introduce the second topic, and then you can do your health breaks as we go. So the second topic that we're going to be talking about in this live masterclass is copyright and public domain. So it's actually a very critical issue in the media and information literacy space. So when I talk about copyright, privacy, and public domain, it's actually one of those issues that we're not really diving deep into. However, it has a lot of implications in the way we navigate through the highly changing landscape of media. And to talk about that is no other than one of our strongest allies in the legal space, the Cine Law. So if you've heard of the Cine Law, they're actually very popular in terms of the legal spaces for media frameworks, for cybersecurity, for cyber frameworks as well, for e-commerce law and things like that. That's precisely what they're specializing on. So to give us a talk on copyright and public domain is no other than Lars Serso, the partner of Decini Law. So Lars actually advises clients on TMT, on corporate and M&A, data privacy and commercial transaction matters. She has relevant experience in assisting clients involved in IT, in fintech and digital platforms on regulatory, transactional, and corporate restructuring projects and issues. He handles the firm's legal education initiatives for the growing community of Philippine-based startups, and together with other lawyers in the firm, she also leads training sessions and seminars on laws and regulations relevant to startups, investors, and entrepreneurs. But most importantly, her team successfully represented a media company in the Supreme Court, where the firm defended the media company's fundamental rights to freedom of the press and access to information. So the case was unanimously decided in favor of the media company. So they actually won this. So coming from this successful case studies, the Decini Law is one of the biggest and of course the most credible legal institutions to talk about media practice and of course the legal implications of copyright, online privacy, and public domain. So let's all welcome and let's all hear from Lars Serso, the partner of the Decini Law.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So, first of all, thank you for choosing to spend your Saturday afternoon with us and the rest of the speakers and the organizers to discuss media literacy. So, I'm Lars Serzo. I'm a lawyer, currently a partner at the Cine Law Office. And this afternoon, I was tasked to talk about or give some overview on copyright law and how it could be relevant when talking about media literacy. All right. So just to provide an overview of the discussion, the objective of today's presentation, which won't take too long, is to provide some basic understanding of copyright law and understand relevant copyright issues. So at the end of the presentation, hopefully the following objectives would be achieved by my short talk. Hopefully the participants will get an idea as to how each of you could utilize existing content, which you may find, in public or in the web or in the course of your research or education, and get an idea as to how you could create your own content or share your own content. in order to communicate your ideas or your ideas to the public in a manner that's not infringing and in a manner that's consistent with existing intellectual property laws, particularly copyright. And hopefully, through this discussion, you will also get an idea as to how you could perhaps protect your own works and your own messages. Identify legal risks, which you might be exposing yourselves in the event that you use certain types of content and certain types of works. Yes, so before we dive into copyright, I'll talk about other types of IP rights. These are patents and trademarks. So generally, IP rights are types of rights or types of privileges afforded to authors and inventors by law in order to provide such persons with exclusive rights and control over their works for a certain period of time. So as you might know, when we talk about copyright, this is the right afforded to authors who've created, creative and original works. Mainly, this would refer to literary and artistic works. So just to avoid any confusion, I just want to explain what patents and trademarks are, although some of you may be quite familiar with them. Patents normally protect inventions and industrial property. So let's say machines or industrial designs or a new way of solving problems. So patents should protect novel solutions to particular problems. So an example would be, let's say, a new type of oven or a particular way of making bread. Something more perhaps relevant or more digital would be Amazon's one-click to buy button. So that particular code is protected by patent in the United States. When we talk about trademarks, on the other hand, this is the type of protection afforded to marks and names, which are associated to certain types of brands or certain types of brands, certain types of goods. So what's being protected there by law is the goodwill of particular brands to make sure that other users or other businesses won't be able to take advantage of the goodwill of other brands by creating some level of confusion. So that's for patents and trademarks. And as you can see, copyright is quite different in that it protects creative works, like let's say literary or artistic works. And these are also different. These types of IP rights are also different in how they are created or how they are vested in the author or the inventor. So just to give you an idea, for patents and trademarks, the trademark holder and the patent holder would have to apply with the Intellectual Property Office in order for them to be granted such protections. So like whether that be a patent or a mark, as opposed to copyright, which I will discuss and mention also later. Copyright is granted from the moment that you create a particular type of your particular work. Let's say that's a painting or a novel. The moment your pen leaves the paper, you have copyright. What's the general rationale as to why the law provides intellectual property rights? So just to step back a little, as I mentioned, whenever an author or an inventor is granted IP rights, they are granted the exclusive right to generally exploit, sell, or in the case of copyright, the exclusive right to perform, distribute, reproduce, create dramatizations out of their works. So that right is exclusive, meaning it would exclude any other person in your particular jurisdiction, or in the case of copyrights, any person in the world from exploiting your work. So from that angle, we see what the rationales are. So number one, of course, is to incentivize authors and inventors in order to keep on creating. And through the exclusive rights, authors are able to protect their initial investment, their initial works, and thus, by allowing them to perhaps monetize or earn from their works, they are rewarded. The law is able to reward them. At the same time, as you will see later, the law also institutes certain limitations as to the IP rights. Let's say a limitation as to the duration of the protection, limitation as to the scope of protection. For copyright, that's where fair use as well as public domain works would come into play. And the rationale as to why the law also provides limitations to the scope is to also allow innovation and the continuous creation of works. The law also recognizes the need for, just everyone to keep on improving works, keep on creating works, which may be based on older works, whether that be a machine, like let's say patents, or that be creative works. In the area of patents, we see that in the way that the law limits the number of years granted to, let's say, medicine or drugs, up to 20 years. That's in order to allow people also to enjoy or create, cheaper types of the drug. For copyright, that's usually 50 years. And again, it's in order to allow people to create and enjoy the work more. At the same time, still allowing some level of protection and exclusivity to the original authors. So those are the rationales. Now, focusing on copyright. So as I mentioned, copyrights are granted, or copyrights aim to protect literary and artistic works, meaning original intellectual creations of an author. So when I say author here, I don't just mean writers or traditional literary creators, but author would extend to photographers or illustrators, producers, like composers, musicians, etc. So all of their works would be covered by copyright. And the protection would extend not just to the original work itself, but also to adaptations, translations of those literary and artistic works. So let's say Harry Potter, the author there, J.K. Rowling, would have copyright over the original English version, but she would also have copyright over all of the translated versions. So let's say, what does that mean? Let's say some user online on social media copies a song or copies a particular excerpt from an English work and translates it to Tagalog or whatever other language. That could potentially still be infringing, since the original author would still have claim over the translated work. As to whether it's infringing or not, then we could explore whether the use was fair use, etc. We'll go to that a bit more later. And again, one concept you must always remember when we talk about copyright is that the protection is granted irrespective of the method by which the work or the creation is created or communicated. Meaning whether that be created in the analog world or in the real physical world using pen and paper or brush to canvas, or if it's created wholly digitally, if it's stored just in your computer or in the cloud or anywhere in the metaverse, copyright protection would still extend to that work. And again, it's protected by the sole fact of its creation and not any other reason, meaning you don't need to formally register with the government or with any registry in order to get copyright. So from the moment of creation, you have copyright. And I mean, just to emphasize the point, whether the work is actually of quality, whatever that means, or whether the work is created for whatever purpose, let's say if it's for a commercial purpose or a non-commercial purpose, it's still protected by copyright. Another concept to remember, just to clarify copyright, is the concept of the idea-expression dichotomy. So it is the expression of the work that's protected and not just the idea. What does that mean? So let's talk about software applications. The idea of a particular app, let's say a logistics app, which would allow users to hail a rider or driver on demand and tell that driver to go somewhere in order to improve or facilitate the delivery of parcels or goods. So that idea itself may not be protected by copyright, but let's say you actually created a code, like a software code, then that code could arguably be protected by copyright as long as the coder could demonstrate that there was some level of creativity or originality in the code. So same thing with story archetypes. The idea of, let's say, a group of friends traveling the kingdom or traveling the world in order to defeat evil is not copyrightable. But if you write a novel or a short story about it, then that becomes subject to copyright. So let's say the story of Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter again, that could be protected by copyright, but just the general plot won't be. So let's say rags to riches or like star-crossed lovers, those general ideas won't be protected by copyright unless and until the author actually expresses it in some way, whether it be through a novel, a short story, or a movie. Now, why would an author want copyright over his or her work? Well, it's because the law, again, provides exclusive rights to authors. So these are exclusive economic rights and exclusive moral rights. And just to clarify, an author is not limited to an individual natural person, but even corporations and juridical persons could own the copyright over certain work assets. So let's say, like Disney Channel owns the copyright over certain characters and over certain films. The same way that, certain studios would own assets over certain assets as well. All right, so back to the rights granted to authors or copyright holders. We have economic and moral rights. And as I mentioned, economic rights would allow the holder to have the exclusive right to reproduce, distribute, publicly perform, as well as make adaptations and translations over the work, and any other types of communications. And other than economic rights, an author would also have, a copyright holder would also have moral rights. An example or one of the moral rights would be the right to be credited, right to attribution, right to be credited for the work, right to restrain any other person from using the author's or the holder's name, right to make any changes or alterations to the work, as well as the right to object to certain types of uses or exploitation of the work. And as you see, this could be very valuable because it would allow the holder to go after infringers or unauthorized users and make monetary claims and such other claims against those infringers. So there's a reward to copyright enforcement and some monetary gain, some monetary value, aside of course from knowing that you're credited for your work. Now, all right, so I think this is the meat of the presentation really. How would a consumer or a user of media / content know when he or she could use copyrighted works, or know if a certain type of asset is copyrighted? I think just to set the stage, what's important to remember, or what you should assume, is that all works that you encounter online or wherever you are is protected by copyright, because as I said, there's a pretty low bar in order for a work, a certain piece of work to be covered by copyright, and it's just really the fact of creation. So most likely everything you encounter is covered by copyright, meaning you should always check the terms or check the work if the copyright is still valid, or if it has expired, if it's covered by a license that would allow you to use it, or that's when you can also evaluate whether the purpose for which you want to use the existing work is fair use, or it would fall under any other exception under copyright law. Okay. Now, I think the next few slides would be about, you know, evaluating or knowing how to use work subject to copyright protection. So generally, copyright is granted for 50 years from publication if it's a published work, or from creation if it's an unpublished work. After that, that particular asset would enter into the public domain, subject again to certain exceptions or certain rules. Like, let's say, if the work or specific use of the work would already be covered by trademark protection. I'll talk about this later on when we go through some of the examples. And then another exception is, let's say, even if the work has not entered the public domain, if your use would fall under fair use, then you can use the work without fear of infringement claims. And I think the most straightforward one, actually, like if the work is not in the public domain, or if it's not fair use, then the most straightforward way to use copyrighted work is to enter into licensing or permission arrangements with the author. So let's tackle this first, since it's the most straightforward one. So licensing would mean, just asking for permission. And if you do, I strongly suggest and recommend that you enter into written agreements with the author/licensor. So your agreement should specify the work, the format of the work, just to avoid any confusion or disputes. It should specify the purpose of the use by the licensee, meaning, your use of the copyrighted work. Like, are you going to use it for commercial or non-commercial purposes? And of course, the duration. Like, will it be, let's say it's for an event, are you only allowed to use it for a particular event, or can you use it for, let's say, the next 3 years, 5 years, etc.? So all of those should be in writing, including any commercial terms, let's say payment of fees, as well as the method for the payment. So everything should be in writing. So this is the safest, most prudent way. Just ask for permission. But of course, I also recognize that this might not be practical, especially if you're not too sure who the author is, or your use is quite time sensitive, etc. Now, another alternative, this would also fall under licensing arrangements, albeit it's going to be much simpler, since you don't have to reach out to the author or the copyright holder. You could use works covered by Creative Commons licenses. So so this is a website you can just browse, and they're hosting a bunch of, substantially a lot of content, and these works are still covered by copyright, meaning it's not like the authors gave up their copyright over the work uploaded here. It's just that these authors have allowed certain types of uses, or users to use their work for certain types of purposes. But you need to check the specific licenses granted, because how Creative Commons does it, it allows authors to pick the particular variation of license. So an author could, like, two opposite ends, right? At one end of the spectrum, an author could allow third persons, users online, to use the work for any purpose, as long as the author is credited or attributed for the work. At another end, let's say, the author would allow non-commercial uses subject to attribution, etc. And there might also be share-alike licenses embedded in those terms. What does that mean? Meaning, if you decide to use work covered by Creative Commons, then any derivative work you create would also be subject to, whatever license it was in. Meaning, you would have to share it to the public as well. Like, you can't keep it to yourself. If you're a company, your company can't own it and keep it to themselves. They would have to upload it here. So again, that would affect your decision as to whether you want to use Creative Commons or not. And just to extend it as well, there are also software codes covered by similar licensing arrangements. These are open source software or software made available to the public for free, subject to share alike or copyleft arrangements. Meaning, let's say a developer, software company, if they want to use open source software because it'll be faster, it'll be easier, less costly, they could do so, but they have to check the licenses because most of them would have share alike licenses, meaning sure you could copy it, but once you're done with your own code, then you have to make that resulting code available to the public as well under similar share alike licenses. So what's the implication? If the software developer wants to create proprietary, confidential products or codes, then it might not be appropriate for such company to use open source software. So this is an interesting, it's an interesting philosophy, an interesting arrangement, copyleft arrangements. In the world of software, this was, one of the leading people here is this guy here, Richard Stallman. And the philosophy behind open source software is that software should not be proprietary. People should not be paying for software because for them, software is just math. Like it's just there. There's like in order for the internet to actually provide what do you call this to provide solutions or to improve society, software should not be kept or should not be made proprietary. It should be made available for everyone. And the idea is that if you do that, you actually end up with much more secure codes because it's available to the public. Like everyone can audit everyone's codes. And by doing so, you end up with better products. So just fun fact, just a short detour there on open source. And again, if you're a creator or a company that consumes or produces content, you should think about whether it's appropriate, again, as I mentioned, whether it's appropriate for you to use Creative Commons or works created by Creative Commons or works software codes which are open source, because there might be some obligations there, licensing obligations. All right. Now we move on to another topic, public domain. So I think there's some confusion, or people might be too loosey-goosey with the term public domain whenever they use this term. So it doesn't refer to all types of work, available to the public or made available to the public. When we say public domain in the realm of copyright law, we talk about certain types of assets or creative works whose copyright term have already lapsed and thus entered into the public domain. As I mentioned, generally works protected by copyright are protected for 50 years. But once that lapses, then the work would enter the public domain. So the copyright does not absolutely terminate, but the public will be given the right to, let's say, use it for their own, to distribute it, to sell versions of it themselves. So what are some just to clarify, when that happens, the original author is still entitled to attribution, meaning you should still credit the original author. So what are some examples? I think this has made the rounds in the news. So A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, like the original story from the 1920s, this has lapsed into the public domain, meaning anyone can create a movie or a story based on the original characters, like here, Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. However, that doesn't mean that, our conception of Winnie the Pooh has already lapsed into the public domain. Like, we have to be careful there because Walt Disney, the company, created their own version of Winnie the Pooh, like the one with the red shirt. And then they also developed certain characters like Tigger. And these versions of the character are still protected by copyright because they weren't part of the original A.A. Milne storyline. But if it's just a character, then you can exploit that all you want. I think that's also why we've seen trailers for like the horror version of Winnie the Pooh. So those were created again because the character has lapsed into the public domain. So you're free to create your own stories involving the character. This was done by, so it's here, I included an article here. It was done by Ryan Reynolds. He created, I mean, at least his company, Mint Mobile, created a commercial using Winnie the Pooh's character without the red shirt. Because again, that's still protected by copyright and it still belongs to Disney. Another character or characters which entered the public domain are certain characters under the Agatha Christie novels, so like Hercule Poirot. These have entered the public domain, but certain short stories written or owned by the estate are still protected by copyright because again they were written much later. And so one more character who may lapse into the public domain soon is Mickey Mouse. So the 1920s character, the Mickey Mouse in the steamboat, like the black and white one, will enter the public domain soon, but newer versions of the mouse and Mickey Mouse characters would still be protected by copyright because again, they're a bit newer. And you have to be careful here because if you're using Mickey Mouse as a way of identifying, or if your use has a way of being associated with Disney, the company, then it might still be infringement, but based on trademark and no longer copyright. Because as you know, the Mickey Mouse logo is protected by trademarks by Disney. And if your use would be associated to the brand, then it's potentially infringing. So that's how Disney keeps on extending its control over the character. Actually, they've registered it as a trademark. So that's also one way for you to, I mean, in case any copyrights, any copyright there is expiring, one way to extend it is to find a way to make it fall under marks, under trademarks. Trademarks do expire, but you could just keep on renewing them. This is unlike copyright. Like copyright, you can't renew. Another example of public domain assets are books older than 50 years, made available on certain websites. Like this one, Project Gutenberg. I'm sure you're familiar with this one. You could access works for which US copyright has already expired. All right, now on to, so that's public domain. Now on to fair use. When we talk about fair use, I think there's a misconception that every time a use or any time that your use of a copyrighted work, let's say a book or, yeah, let's say a book, anytime that your use, the misconception is that anytime your use is for educational purposes, then automatically that's fair use. So that's incorrect. When we say fair use, as illustrated and as repeated by Philippine courts, you have to look at the totality of the circumstances behind a particular use. So there are four factors that you have to look at. You have to look at the purpose and character of the use, meaning like, is the use for commercial purposes or is it for non-profit educational purposes, etc. And then you also have to look at the nature of the copyrighted work. Nature meaning, is it written work? Is it a book? Is it software? Is it a movie, etc.? Because depending on the nature, the type, the type of uses might change. And then you also have to look at the amount and substantiality of the portion used in a particular instance in relation to the entire work. So let's say it's a book, and then let's say you require it for school, right, as part of your syllabus, and then you made copies of the entire book, then arguably that might not be fair use because you exploited the entire book. But let's say you only quoted certain excerpts or certain chapters, then that might be easier to defend as fair use. And then fourth, you have to look at the effect of the use on the potential market or the value of the copyrighted work. Again, going back to the example of a book, copying the entire book or substantial amounts of the book would definitely be detrimental or substantially affect the ability of the author to earn from the book, as opposed to, let's say, just copying an excerpt. So what's one example? Let's say you're doing book reviews, or you're writing for a publication, you're writing for a news website, but your job is to review books. Of course, it's fair use if you just copy excerpts for the purpose of conducting your critique or conducting your review. But copying substantial amounts, arguably, might not be fair use. Again, when evaluating whether it's fair use or not, you should look at the totality of the circumstances, guided by the 4 factors which we just discussed. And for something to be fair use, the use must be transformative. Meaning you're not just reproducing or mimicking or copying the work, but you're doing something else with it. Like, for example, as I mentioned, you're doing a critique or you're providing criticism over certain types of publications or certain types of audiovisual work. Then that if the use is transformative, it increases your chances of arguing its fair use. Let's say it's parody. Obviously, whenever you're making parody, that necessitates the copying of a book or copying of the work. So that's fine because it's parody. And then same thing if you're doing a news report, it's not like you're copying the work, but you might just be flashing portions of it in order to facilitate the provision of the news. Same thing with teaching, research, and scholarship, etc. Again, there's no hard and fast rule. The totality of the circumstances surrounding each particular use should be studied. And just to drive the point home, just because your use is for non-profit purposes does not automatically mean it's fair use. So you can't just photocopy books. You can't just make copies of movies, etc. Just some examples. So there was a case in the I think this was still during President Arroyo's time. Not sure if you're aware, but there was this case of the OFW who was kidnapped in the Middle East, and then eventually, he was rescued. He was given back. No, I think we paid ransom. The Philippine government paid the requested ransom for that, and then the OFW was successfully sent home. So ABS-CBN was able to have a live broadcast of a live footage of the moment that the OFW was in the airport when he got off the plane, when he was in NAIA. And GMA did a rebroadcast. So they did their own breaking news story, but they used the exact same footage taken by ABS-CBN. And then ABS-CBN filed an infringement, a claim for copyright infringement against GMA, arguing that what GMA did was, infringement. And as a defense, GMA said that their use was actually covered by fair use because it was news, and under the law, news of the day may not be protected by copyright. So that was the main argument. And when it reached the Supreme Court said that yes, news of the day, just general events, may not be protected by copyright, meaning anyone would be able legally to make their own expressions or create their own materials out of news events. However, news expressed in a particular video footage or particular creative works would still be protected by copyright. So again, this is what we mentioned earlier, the idea expression dichotomy. So news itself is not protected, meaning no one can have monopoly over news events. But once that's implemented or manifested in like a particular footage or a particular article, those manifestations would already be protected by copyright. And then here below, I found an excerpt. So this is just recent. So a college professor found a website where his past students started uploading exam questions. And again, it's not like the students were doing this for commercial purposes. They weren't earning from it. But what the professor did is to file a copyright infringement claim against those students. So this is yet to be resolved by the relevant U.S. courts. But we see how, just saying that particular uses are not done for commercial purposes, like that argument alone won't be a sufficient defense against infringement. Here's another example. So if you're familiar with NBA 2K, as in the game, the PlayStation or the Xbox game, uh, NBA 2K, like when they create characters, they usually, like let's say the LeBron James character, the digital version of the LeBron James character in the games is rendered complete with all of his tattoos. Now, what happened here was that the tattoo artist filed a case against the owner or the publisher of the NBA 2K games, arguing that when he tattooed LeBron James, he did not authorize LeBron James to publicly display or publicly depict those tattoos. So the argument here by the tattoo artist was that he had copyright over the tattoos as creative works, and only he alone can grant licenses or permission to third parties in order to allow them to publicly depict or publicly perform the work, right? So in this particular instance, when it reached the New York Federal Court, the court sided with NBA 2K, stating that the use was fair use because the use was de minimis. The use was minimal, meaning it's not like the tattoos were used by NBA 2K in order to sell more copies of the games. It's not like they were displayed prominently. And in fact, when you play the game, according to the court, it's not like you are able to clearly see the tattoos on the basketball player. So in this particular instance, the game publisher won. But interestingly, a few months after, another tattoo artist filed a complaint against the publisher of the WWE, the wrestling games. So same argument, he owns copyright over that tattoo. The game publisher does not have authority to publicly depict it, etc. But surprisingly, in that later case, the WWE case, the court sided with the tattoo artist, stating that the use was not consistent. The use by the game publisher was not consistent with fair use because the game copied or depicted the entire tattoo. No attribution was given. It was displayed for everyone, for all gamers to see, etc. So what does this tell us? I think what this tells us is the law on copyright, especially in the digital space, is still evolving. And it's going to be interesting to see how all of these issues will eventually be threshed out in later cases and how it could affect the way or the manner by which we consume and use content and create derivative works. Anyway, so takeaways. So when you talk about media literacy, it's also important to think about copyright or intellectual property protections, which are present over works or media, which we come across. Because like when we say media literacy, this is about understanding media and content, and it also includes knowing how to use said media and content for the purposes that we want to. So again, we should be careful about knowing whether there are existing licensing deals, licensing arrangement, whether a particular a particular asset is already in the public domain, whether we can use it for our own purposes, whether it be commercial or non-commercial. And as I said, the most prudent thing really is to check whatever licensing agreements you may have or whatever licensing agreements are already provided by the authors. So to be safe, do stick with like creative work covered by Creative Commons or work already in the public domain. And if you think your use would be compatible with the concept of fair use, do try to go through the 4 factors we just mentioned, knowing the purpose for which you're using the work, the nature of the work, the proportionality of the content that you're using in relation to the entirety of the asset, etc. So there's again no hard and fast rule for fair use. Courts usually take it on a case-to-case basis, and you just have to make sure that you could, at best, argue in your favor each of the four factors. So I think that's it. Hopefully, you learned something this afternoon. And if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to email me in my email address flashed in the screen. And I'll do my best to answer your questions ASAP. Thank you again and have a good day.
Okay, so for the knowledge of everyone, so Lars gave us a recorded session. It means we're not going to have a Q&A session for this segment. I know that at least one of you raised a question in the chat. So we flashed the email address of Lars Serzo at the very last part of her talk. So make sure that you raise those questions to her, because we're not going to have any Q&A anymore for this particular part. Obviously, because she was on a different appointment. But she generously gave us a recording of the copyright discussion, the discussion on copyright on public domain and fair use. So I hope you guys were able to save that email. Reserve those questions for Lars. I can't answer those questions. I'm not a lawyer. So Lars is the best person to be able to answer those questions. So our next speaker and the final speaker for this afternoon is already here. But before that, we are going to have a quick 5-minute break. So we are going to have a quick minute break. It's 2:55 already right now. We're gonna regroup in this Zoom meeting room. Do not leave the room at all. Just come back here at 3 p.m. Okay, so we can have a fresh start for the next discussion on introduction to MIL. See you guys. Hi everyone. So thank you so much that for that chance no, and time. Of course, very little time lang for break. And of course, you guys are still here tuning in despite this very stressful Saturday afternoon. Um, and of course, we already have two sessions. We've covered so far the topic on navigation of the evolving Philippine media landscape. And secondly, we also talked about the copyright, public domain, and fair use. So to even give us a deep dive onto the media and information literacy, he is going to give us the basics, the foundations of what we really have to learn in this introduction to media and information literacy. So let me quickly introduce him. The speaker and the final speaker for our live masterclass today for Media Civics Lab Fact Checking Academy is Marlon Nombrado. He is a dynamic and enterprising activist academic. He's a licensed professional educator, a critical media literacy advocate, and an aspiring communication researcher. He's currently juggling his time teaching, running a nonprofit, and writing his master's thesis. And he is committed to contributing to the nation's development through the promotion of progressive discourse within and beyond the academe. Let's all welcome the co-founder of the Out of the Box Media Literacy Initiative and one of my friends to talk about introduction to MIL, Marlon Nombrado. Go ahead, Marlon.
Hello everyone. Magandang hapon. Good afternoon, Gab. Good afternoon to all of our participants for this afternoon's program. First of all, I want to greet everyone. Happy International Human Rights Day. I hope everyone is safe, well, and truly empowered in whatever you are engaged in. But I do believe that for today, yung participants natin mostly identify themselves as influencers, no? Or content creators. Maganda pag-isipan yun eh. Yung palang mismong label na influencer, ano bang qualifications, no? Or can we actually assume this title? No, all of us who are in social media, with the way we influence and share ideas, try to get people to believe, to buy, to act certain ways based on our posts. Are we influencers in our own? Aren't we all influencers in our own rights in varying degrees? So let me just pull up my presentation first. Right here. I hope everyone can see it right now. So for my presentation, it's going to be an introduction to media and information literacy. What I intend to talk about this afternoon are the different frameworks, no? Different guiding principles that define for us what media and information literacy is. When we use this term, ano ba talaga yung ibig sabihin natin, no? And then we will be zooming in on one specific framework that emphasizes the civic intentionality of media and information literacy. Pag sinabing civic intentionality, meron siyang purpose, meron siyang pakay beyond personal, beyond private, immediate interests, no? Meron siyang gustong iambag sa lipunan, no? Sa panahon na gusto nating singilin ang bawat isa, hindi lang yung mga politiko, kundi yung mga ordinaryong mga Pilipino, ordinaryong tao. Gusto nating singilin ang bawat isa sa atin ng ambag natin sa lipunan. We ought to ask this question, no? How can we design media literacy interventions? How can we perform media literacy with civic intentionality? And of course, it's very important that we ground our discussion in Philippine realities. So we'll also be talking about some challenges and opportunities in MIL in the Philippines. So I was introduced already earlier. Ako po si Marlon. So my friends and I built Out of the Box or OOTB 8 years ago, 2014, right after we graduated. when my friends Sarah and Darlene thought of coming up with a project that teaches mass communication students and graduates about what we basically learned in our own school, no, sa Diliman, sa Masscom sa Diliman. Doon nagsimula yung kwento ng Out of the Box. And the rest is history. We've been conducting workshops, we've been designing resources, and conducting campaigns surrounding various issues that relate to media and education. So, simulan ko yung session ko dito sa very cute, funny, and relevant cartoon from another influencer, no? Isang content creator din na ang pangalan niya ay Typical Pinoy Crap. So may dalawang characters lang. I actually hope that all of you have big enough screens to see all of my presentation because some slides actually have smaller fonts. I try to adjust them anyway. So basahin natin. Sabi ng lalaki, pangarap ko maging influencer. Sagot nung naka-pink, wow, ayos yan. May something ka na ba na gustong i-influence sa mga tao? Tapos sagot nung lalaki, kailangan nun. Ewan ko, hindi ko nakikita yung mga mukha nyo, pero sana ganun din yung reaction nyo, no? I mean, it should spark some, ano ba, meron bang sense of guilt on your part as influencers or content creators when you started to, produce content or again, identify or label yourself as an influencer? Was there actually that specific moment that you made that decision? Oh, I want to influence people, or I actually want to share what I know. And what made you make that decision? No? So this afternoon in my session, as I discuss media and information literacy with you, we will be putting it in the context of the role of influencers and content creators in promoting MIL, and at the same time, how even if you might not be conscious or even deliberate about it, in one way or another, you've actually been engaging in media literacy practices already, no? Kahit na hindi nyo pa ginagamit yung term na MIL or ML literacy, sa simpleng pagbuo ng content, pag-share nito, at pag-engage sa iba't ibang mga audiences gamit ng media, that in itself is media literacy already. And in order for us to understand how that works, what I intend to share with you are a couple of frameworks, actually more than two, a handful of different frameworks that I believe can be very useful for you in understanding what MIL is. Also, I realized earlier that for my session, and I'm not quite sure what actually is the whole design of this fact-checking academy for influencers for MIL. Pero nakikita ko sa session ko at least, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're not going to answer the what question. We're also not going to answer the how question. Like I'm not going to attempt to tell you how to get likes or how to get really compelling, engaging videos because I think that is your turf and that's something that I could actually learn more from you. Instead, for my session, ang question na sasagutin natin, not who, not what, not how, not when, not where, but ano yung natitira? The why question. No? Another way to put the why question, ito yung so what question, no? So yun yung point ng cartoon kanina, no, na bakit ka nga ba naging influencer? Ano yung why? Ano yung malalim na dahilan why this is something that can be meaningful, can be productive, can be enriching, not only for yourself, not only for the individual, but for the greater good. So we'll start off with the framework from UNESCO, which is the global authoritative body when it comes to MIL. In fact, it is actually UNESCO which coined this very term, because before MIL became a thing, became a term, hiwa-hiwalay yung mga iba't ibang notions na yan, no? Merong media literacy, merong info literacy, digital literacy, new literacies, TV, social media, radio, hiwa-hiwalay itong mga so-called new literacies. And what UNESCO thought of in 2007 was to recommend the use of the term media and information literacy. And 4 years after that, in 2011, the seminal publication titled Media and Information Literacy Curriculum for Teachers was published. UNESCO focused on the importance of MIL in the education process and to make it easier for them to integrate MIL into their teaching by providing them with appropriate pedagogical methods, syllabuses, and resources. Obviously, yung isa sa mga landmark at pinaka-importanting resources on MIL was designed for teachers. This alone will tell us that the MIL concept of UNESCO, which is largely what is being followed or adopted in many countries all over the world, is embedded in the context of education, no? So doon talaga siya naka-implement, no, kung paano maituturo yung MIL sa loob ng paaralan, paano ito may integrate sa program sa libraries, paano ito maituturo ng iba't ibang mga guro, no, sa kanilang subjects, regardless kung ano yung subject nila, English, AP, Math, paano mai-integrate yung MIL as a teaching approach. Yun yung PEG ni UNESCO. In 2015, everyone should be familiar with this, hopefully, especially sa konteksto ng International Human Rights Day, no? In 2015, UNESCO adopted 17 SDGs, o ito yung tinatawag na Sustainable Development Goals, as the primary collective objectives of international development cooperation. So obviously, Philippines, as one of the member states of UNESCO, of UN, I mean, isa ito dun sa mga pina-follow natin, no? Na gusto nating marating, no? Ibig sabihin, collective objectives, bawat bansa, bawat unit, bawat miyembro ng lipunan sa iba't ibang lupalok ng mundo ay ito yung ina-eye natin na ma-achieve natin ng mga goals. So in line with this 2015 publication of the SDGs, UNESCO updated their 2011 publication to produce yung kanilang second edition, which they titled Think Critically, Click Wisely, Media and Information Literate Citizens. So aside from putting MIL in the context of SDGs, what this publication did was to locate the topic of MIL in the context of the pandemic. Alam naman natin, no, sa konteksto ng pandemic, ang daming mga umusbong na napakaraming bagong mga problema related to media. And of course, this information is something that comes to mind first, but not only that, no? Sobrang taas din ng sobrang laki din ng paglobo ng cases, halimbawa ng OSAEC or yung online sexual exploitation against children, at iba pang mga klase ng OGBV or online gender-based violence, no? Napakalaki din ng pagtaas ng cases, halimbawa ng phishing and scams, no? Yung mga nakakatanggap ng mga scams online na murang pa-loan, murang mga pautang, and so on and so forth. So it's very important for UNESCO to keep on updating their resources so that it matches the needs and the challenges of the present time. Still, when it comes to UNESCO's framework of MIL, very important na nakaangkla siya doon sa Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which talks about our right to freedom of opinion and of expression, and even our right to hold opinions without interference, to seek, receive, impart information and ideas through any media regardless of frontiers. No? Maring itong bagay na to is a mouthful for a lot of us, but this is actually the the baseline, kumbaga. Bakit merong mga influencers? Bakit malaya tayong nakakapag-organize ng mga ganitong klase ng training? Kasi nire-respeto natin na this is part of human rights. Na sa bansang Pilipinas, at the very least, and hopefully in all nation states around the world, this particular right is respected, is guaranteed. Now, of course, in reality, hindi nangyayari ito sa napakaraming mga bansa pa rin sa mundo, no? It's very difficult for people to express their opinion, especially when it comes to politics, in expressing their sexuality, for example, in a lot of places, homosexuality is still illegal, for example, and you can actually get jailed for being homosexual. So a lot of these things, we might be, anong tawag dito? Underappreciated na, no? Hindi natin siya gaanong nararamdaman kasi we've been enjoying it for so long. Not, of course, that we need to experience losing it, but what I'm trying to tell you is that everything that we are enjoying as freedom-loving citizens of our country, it is based on human rights. And it's important that MIL is grounded on human rights. No? Na hindi tayo nagtuturo halimbawa ng fact-checking kasi uso lang siya. Nagtuturo tayo halimbawa ng fact-checking at nagfa-fact-check tayo kasi naniniwala tayo na it's part of our right to impart, to seek, to receive reliable information. Not only any kind of information, but reliable, useful information. At tulad na nabanggit ko kanina, when it comes to the SDGs, ito yung at least 4 specific SDGs that relate to MIL on ensuring healthy lives and well-being, because obviously media is definitely embedded in our well-being, no? Pag sinabi natin na healthy life and healthy well-being, kasama dyan yung ating mental health, no? At especially nitong konteksto nga ng pandemic, napakaraming mga kabataan ang nakulong talaga sa digital lives nila and has greatly suffered when it comes to their social capacities at na-expose sa napakaraming iba't ibang klase ng dangers online. So MIL has a huge role when it comes to SDG 3. Number 4, medyo obvious na to, no? At hindi na kailangan ipaliwanag. Quality education for all. When it comes to SDG 5, gender equality and women's empowerment, all of these media challenges that I've been talking about, laging asymmetrical ang effect nito sa kababaihan at sa mga members ng LGBT. Ibig sabihin, kung ang mga lalaki ay halimbawa ang mga heterosexual male members of the society ay affected ng cyberbullying, affected ng fake news, affected ng violence online, stalking, etc., etc. Just imagine the extra layer that is being experienced by women and members of the queer community, for example, when it comes to these dangers. So napakahalaga para sa gender equality and women's empowerment ng MIL. And of course, SGD 16.10 is related to the one that is posted above on Article 19. Still, I'm going to show you a couple more frameworks from the UNESCO. These are included in their most recently published book, yung Think Critically, Click Wisely. So sabi ko nga kanina, the intention of merging together infolit, media lit, digital lit into just one umbrella is to mainstream itong mga divergent and yet very much overlapping concepts. No? Sabi ng UNESCO dito, MIL is a set of competencies that emphasize the development of inquiry-based skills and the ability to engage meaningfully with all forms of content providers and mediators irrespective of technologies they are using. Una, yung inquiry-based skills, ibig sabihin capacity to ask question. This is at the heart of media and information literacy. Hindi pwedeng basta tanggap ka lang ng tanggap kung ano man yung ibigay sa'yo ng media. Dapat marunong ka magtanong, marunong ka mag-negotiate ng meanings. And the second part, the ability to engage meaningfully. No? Ano ba ibig sabihin ng meaningfully? Meaningful hindi lang sa'yo, kundi sa lipunan din. No? Ibig sabihin, una, kaya nga siya meaningful, ibig sabihin meron siyang kahulugan, nagigets mo siya. Ikalawa, meaningful, ibig sabihin meron itong productive na ambag doon sa tao. Nakakapagpalago ito halimbawa ng kanyang kaalaman, nakakapagbigay ito ng opportunities para makapagtrabaho halimbawa. Meaningful, maaari din when it comes to building relationships, building connections to people, and so on and so forth. This particular diagram called the ecology of MIL simply shows us all of the different literacies that might have been introduced before MIL has been officially coined as a term. No? Makikita nyo dito yung visual literacy, computer literacy, data literacy, AI literacy. Lahat yan, para kay MIL, it's part of just one entire ecology that seeks to harmonize all of these different notions. Last from UNESCO is this diagram which shows us the different MIL knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes. Medyo maliit na no and very difficult to read, but just to guide you, meron two parts itong donut na ito. Itong pink and purple no na texts, these are MIL knowledge and skills. On the other hand, itong blue and green no na nasa circle, these are MIL values and attitudes. So why am I showing you this? Because it's very important that when we speak about MIL, we're not only talking about media production skills. Hindi lang ito yung ability natin na mag-fact check halimbawa o ability natin na gumamit ng PowerPoint or ability natin na gumawa ng poster gamit ang isang digital software. That is part of MIL. Those are very useful skills to become media and information literate. Pero dapat hindi natin nalilimutan yung values and attitudes part. Ibig sabihin, if we truly want to become MIL, if we truly want to become media and information literate, we need to be adopting certain values. No, dapat pinapahalagahan natin yung freedom of expression. Dapat meron tayong pagpapahalaga sa human rights. Dapat meron tayong pagpapahalaga sa self-awareness and open-mindedness. No? More on this later. Next framework I'm going to show you is the one from my organization. We call it Interrogate, Create, Participate framework. Obviously, this framework is guided, informed by other frameworks. No? So I can't claim for this to be a 100% original thing that we came up with. And you will see that in my presentation, no, marami siyang similarities at marami siyang, kumbaga, hinugot mula sa UNESCO MIL concepts and principles. For us in Out of the Box, when we use the term media literacy, we mean three things. It means to interrogate, or in other words, to ask questions. It means to create, but not to create just for fun, just for laughs, just for the sake of it. Ang motto namin, lumikha ng bago at lumikha para sa pagbabago. Ibig sabihin, dapat bago, dapat fresh, no? Kung na-interrogate mo na, nakita mo na ano yung mga klase ng kwento na gasgas na o mali ang representation, dapat hindi mo na uulitin yon. So, kailangan gumawa ka ng bago. At syempre, kailangan meron kang motivation to create stories that can create change. Because we never settle. That's the basic motto, no? We never settle. We don't want to settle with what's popular, with what's dominant, with what's the status quo. If we have things that we want to change, we need to be the one to instigate that change. I hope I'm making sense. No, I'm talking to content creators, to influencers, and yes, I know it's a common practice that if you want to be a popular influencer, dapat makiuso ka, 'di ba? Dapat you have to know what is trending, you have to know what clicks to the audiences and so on and so forth. Now, of course, I'm not against that. We need to be able to tap into algorithms. We need to know how virality works, blah blah blah. But we shouldn't be forgetting, sabi ko nga kanina, yung values, no? Why, why? No, we should not be forgetting yung so what question. And the third component of our framework is digital citizenship or participate. Because today, as citizens, we do not only participate physically, no, or in physical spaces, we also participate online. And digital citizenship as a concept has a huge role to play in that. So these practices are distinct on their own and yet they are overlapping. And as I've mentioned already earlier, in the UNESCO framework, they do not only mean skills and knowledge, they also include values and attitudes. And we see them as practices that should be cultivated so they become habits and norms. Kumbaga magiging second nature na natin siya. No? Pagka nanonood tayo ng palabas, hindi na tayo natatawa doon sa mga joke na sexist. Hindi na bumebenta sa atin yung mga hirit ng mga host na medyo below the belt, kumbaga, no? Tumataas yung ating level of appreciation para sa mga palabas at nagkakaroon tayo ng development for more inclusive, more just, and correct representations of our narratives. That's just one example. And of course, when it comes to the issue of disinformation, hindi na tayo basta nagpapaniwala sa mga clickbait na mga headlines at videos na alam naman natin na gusto lang talagang kunin yung attention natin, gusto lang tayong i-trigger, so i-share natin agad. So if MIL becomes cultivated as habits and norms, this is something na nakikita namin na efficient at effective talaga na paraan para ma-combat natin yung disinformation problem. If you want to learn more about this framework, you can visit our website because there are other components in this framework that I won't be discussing anymore. So I'm done with 2 already. We're going to the third framework, which is coming from a US-based organization called CML or Center for Media Literacy. Now, I make sure that whenever I do workshops on media literacy, I never remove this part of the discussion because CML, aside from it being one of the oldest, one of the earliest proponents and champions of MIL, I do believe in the motto. We do believe in the motto of CML. According to their founder, Elizabeth Thoman, at the heart of media literacy is the principle of inquiry. Ibig sabihin, kung gusto mong maging media literate, Dapat marunong kang magtanong. So, this is their framework. They actually call it Q-tips, no? Question slash tips. So what we have in this framework, and I hope it's visible to all of you, are 5 key concepts. The concept of authorship, format, audience, content, and purpose. No? So ito yung mga keywords. And what is very, very useful in this Q-tips framework of CML, meron silang deconstruction questions at meron din silang construction questions. Ibig sabihin, these are the questions that you ought to ask if you are watching or consuming a media content, this column. And then they also wrote questions that you ought to ask when you are producing or creating content. Now, both of these are very useful for influencers and content creators. But perhaps we can focus on the fourth column. No, what are the questions that we ought to ask when we are producing content? Siyempre, alam ko marami ang iniisip is paano tayo makakakuha ng maraming likes? Paano natin maaabot yung ating target audiences? Paano natin maiko-convey yung ating message na magigets ng ating tina-target na mga manonood? All of these are important questions to ask, of course. But actually, part yun ito. Part yun ito. Number 3 is on audience. How can I make my message compelling, for example? And then when it comes to format, ano yung best na atake, best na approach sa ang social media ko to i-upload? Ano yung dimensions ng aking video, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes we are forgetting, for example, number 4, when it comes to our values that we share. No? Ano ba yung mga pinuput forward natin na mga values ng tao? Ano yung mga biases and opinion at paano natin ito carefully pinapackage para maintindihan at magamit ng mga intended natin na manonood. No? So, I invite you definitely to try this out. Check out this framework from CML and see how you can actually make use of it in your day-to-day profession or day-to-day media consumption. So tatlo na, no? And I hope you guys are still with me. Tatlo na yung frameworks na naipakita ko sa inyo. And for this 3 other frameworks and concepts, bibilisan ko na lang at magpipick lang tayo ng mga specific na mga points from these 3 key media literacy thinkers that I believe are very important, have very important points to make in our work. Una, si Renee Hobbs. Ikalawa, si Douglas Kellner and Jeff Scher. So I only have here Douglas Kellner, the one in the middle, and then si Paul Mihailidis. So, yung from Renee Hobbs, her question that she always asks people who are in the media literacy advocacy, what is your purpose? Is it to protect people or to empower people? Para saan ba ang MIL? Para ba ma-empower natin yung mga kabataan at yung mga media users para makagawa sila ng magandang content halimbawa at makapag-fact check sila? Or ang perspective ba natin gusto nating mag-promote ng MIL kasi gusto nating protektahan yung mga kabataan. Gusto nating protektahan yung mga media audiences na hindi sila ma-impluwensyahan ng mga harmful effects ng media. So according to Renee Hobbs, you don't really have to make a choice because it's not an either or kind of scenario. It is actually 2 sides of the same coin. Ibig sabihin, whenever we engage with our audiences, dapat nakikita natin sila both as potential victims of media effects and at the same time, we also regard them as active constructors of messages and meaning. Gets ba? Sana nagigets niyo yung sinasabi ko, no? Na how do we apply this in the work of influencers? No? Una, dapat meron tayong um, tiwala, meron tayong confidence sa ating mga manonood na kaya nilang maintindihan yung ating sinasabi sa kanila. Now, what we're doing is not mere spoon feeding per se, but what we are actually doing is helping them um, gain knowledge and at the same time be able to have meaningful interaction with new information that they are receiving from us. All right. Next, critical media literacy is popularized by two scholars by the name of Douglas Kellner and Jeff Scher. Sabi nila, very important that when we teach media literacy, makikita nila na yung media literacy ay forma ng hindi lang self-expression, kundi ng aktivismo rin. No? Sa paanong paraan? No? Let's get a specific quote from their 2019 book. Ang sabi dito sa libro na to, media culture is a type of pedagogy that teaches proper and improper behavior, gender roles, values, and knowledge of the world. Individuals are often not aware that they are being educated and constructed by media culture as its pedagogy is frequently invisible and subliminal. Sa madaling salita, yung media daw ay nakakapagturo din, no? Maaring hindi sa ganitong klase ng paraan where obviously ako yung teacher, ako yung nagtuturo at kayo yung mga estudyante. So very linear, very clear yung labels ng sino yung nagtuturo, paano natututo, paano nagtuturo, blah blah blah. Pero sa media culture, marami sa mga bagay na itinuturo sa atin ng media, hindi natin consciously na re-realize na ay na shape na pala, na impluwensyahan na pala ako ng influencer na ito, no? Or we don't really recollect specific instances, but just the whole amount of media that we consume actually shapes our values, our behavior, our knowledge. So again, going back to the perspective, as content creators, as knowledge builders, as influencers, dapat mas maging conscious tayo kung paano natin sinusubukan na hubugin at i-shape yung consciousness ng ating mga manonood. Panghuli is this framework from Paul Mihailidis. Ang sa kanya naman, tinawag na ito na civic media literacies. No? Ang point lang dito ni Paul Mihailidis, kapag tayo ay nagtuturo kung paano mag-critique at mag-create ng media, dapat lagit-lagi meron itong intention na makapag-ambag sa ikabubuti ng ibang tao. No? There should be an approach for us to critique and create media that positions us as a member of a larger society, as someone who advocates for the greater good of the community. So kung napansin nyo kanina yung mga frameworks, marami sa mga frameworks nakafocus sa skills. No? At actually, for the past couple of years, because of the boom of disinformation, most media literacy programs have really focused on fact-checking, which is a very skills-based kind of MIL intervention. Sabi ni Paul Mihailidis, importante yon, pero dapat hindi nawawala yung value. And so what he did in his framework, instead of listing down MIL skills, what he listed are value constructs: caring, critical consciousness, imagination, persistence, and emancipation. Pipili lang tayo ng dalawa because I won't be able to discuss all of it. Unahin natin yung caring. According to Paul Mihailidis, it's very important for us to distinguish two phrases that we often use interchangeably, which is caring about and caring for. A lot of us care about something. Actually, many of us care about so many things. We care about what is going on in Ukraine, for example. We care about the prices of onion. We care about our loved ones who are probably working far away, working as OFWs. But the problem with caring about something is that it is transactional. Yung bang para bang, okay, may paki ako, ito. Oh, ito yung ambag ko. Okay na? Okay na ba yung paki ko? No, na satisfy ko na yung yung ine-expect sa akin nung paki ko, no? Pero pag sinabi mo na you care for something, sabi nga ni Paul Mihailidis dito, it's when I must do something transforms into something must be done. Ito yung kapag nare-realize mo na hindi sapat yung mag-donate ka lang, hindi sapat yung mag-share ka lang ng post. Kailangan tanggalin mo na yung sarili mo dun sa picture at i-embed mo yung sarili sa isang mas malaking movement, kumbaga. No? This is when you start to sign up as part of organizations, for example. This is when you attend rallies and just realize that a lot of these things can't be solved just by voting, for example, or oh, ito na yung paki ko, ano kasi ako Pilipino ko, kaya lang naman ako bumoto kasi taxpayer ako, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Pero hindi natin na-realize na what is needed is we have to uh, care for all of these issues. Now, of course, ang dami naman talagang mga issues sa lipunan, no? And isang tao ka lang naman, minsan masarap na magkape-kape na lang at mag-relax, mag-enjoy with family, with friends. Now, that is totally okay, no? And I'm not trying to make you feel guilty about not doing enough or whatever. But this is something for us to think about, no? Ikalawa, again, hindi na natin dadaanan yung 5. Ikalawa is imagination. I like this one very specifically because I think when it comes to media consumption, sabi nila media web 2.0 will democratize knowledge. Ibig sabihin, hindi na limited yung mga information sources natin. And this will inspire creativity. At totoo naman, di ba? Because of web 2.0, because of social media, andyan na, nagkalat ang mga influencers, nagkalat ang vloggers. Lahat pwedeng gumawa ng mga tutorial videos. Meron kang drawing, meron kang tinahi na damit, pwede mong ibenta online. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. But why is it that we still need to imagine better? Now, why is it that there's still this call for us to find a way to envision alternatives? Kasi in the same way that digital media can expand us, it can also very much narrow us, no? I-limit us, limitahan tayo doon sa mga bagay na nai-expose tayo through what's this? Through the concept of echo chambers, for example, and filter bubbles. No? Na kung ano lang yung na-expose tayo, doon na lang tayo. Yun kasi doon tayo kasi masaya eh. Doon tayo komportable. Pero again, ang challenge sa atin ni Paul Mihailidis, envision alternatives and develop new pathways. Now, this is where I wrap it up before I start getting overly passionate about what I'm talking about. No? So we wrap it up going back with a cartoon earlier. No? Again, ang question natin is not what, not how, but why? And I hope through the frameworks that I've shared with you, you were able to reflect better on the work and the hobby, whatever you want to call that, and you realize better kung ano yung why ninyo. Um, just to add just a couple more slides before I close the presentation, let me just share with you some important notes from this publication from UNESCO as well on the MIL education in Asia, where there's a specific chapter that was written by Ramon Tuazon and company on the MIL situation in the Philippines. Although this is very much um, discussed in the context of the education system. So ang mga recommendations talaga dito tungkol sa pag-update ng MIL curriculum halimbawa, pag-develop ng mas marami pang resources, pagtuturo ng MIL sa mga teachers in training, etc., etc. Now, I think even if you're not necessarily in the field of education, or you're not necessarily a teacher, or you're not creating educational videos, I believe this is a very potent area for you to get involved in. No? Kung kayo po ay gagawa ng mga content that is related to MIL, it would be very nice for you to be familiar. Ano yung mga gaps? Like for example, sa curriculum na tinuturo sa DepEd, hindi nakalagay doon na you're supposed to talk about or teach about fake news. Now, if the DepEd teacher teaches about it in class, ano na yon? Anong tawag dito? Prerogative na yon. Sariling initiative na yon ng teacher. But the curriculum itself doesn't say anything about fake news, about disinformation, about fact-checking at all. So, obviously, a very huge gap in the curriculum that we're still trying to lobby in the government. Last month nga lang ba? Last month na pala, December na nga pala. We did the Global Media and Information Literacy Week. You will find there the logo of Break the Fake as well, along with so many other partners that we've worked with to put together the Global MIL Week celebration. It happens every 24th to 31st of October. And for next year, we're hoping to do it bigger, wider, more extensive, and we're hoping to engage all of you in that. Last na slide na. Sorry, medyo halo-halo na yung mga last slide ko. I just want to show you this framework again from the UNESCO, which simply shows that in solving this information, media literacy will definitely be not enough. Fact-checking will definitely be not enough. It's important that we do not lose sight of these two other pathways. Yung legal means, no, pag-develop ng mga batas, pagreporma ng ating mga polisiya, at ikalawa, pag-improve ng ating mga digital media spaces, no? Improvement of content moderation of Facebook, improvement of their AI and algorithmic mechanisms, and so on and so forth. No? So, MIL is obviously an important thing that I hope all of you will advocate for. But at the same time, I hope you will be able to tie it together with all of these other responses that are very much needed in order for us to have a chance against disinformation. If you want to learn more or work with us, these are our contacts. You can email out of the box at info@ootbmedialiteracy.org. We are on Instagram and Facebook as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marlon. I know a lot of our participants have questions, so please feel free to use the Zoom chat option for the question and answer portion. We're opening the floor for the questions about the introduction to media literacy. Meanwhile, Marlon, I know you're one of the front runners, no, of promoting MIL in the Philippines. You have just organized the Global MIL Week. So that's a very welcome addition to the roster of activities that we have annually here in the Philippines. for our influencers and content creators, how can they, let's just say, radically participate in the promotion of MIL in the Philippines?
Radically participate. One way definitely is to organize themselves. Being someone with student activist backgrounds, no, even out of the box, no, lahat kami ng co-founders ay nandun yung roots namin. Napakalaga para sa amin yung idea of organizing people. And by organizing, ibig sabihin, hindi tayo fragmented. No? Hindi tayo kanya-kanya na gusto ko lang maging influencer kasi meron akong mga personal na gustong ma-achieve in life. Gusto kong lumawak yung aking clout. And again, I'm not trying to antagonize or tawag dito, to be killjoy or anything. But I think what is important is for us to stretch even further yung capacities ng internet when it comes to organizing, when it comes to building bridges instead of fragmenting ourselves. No? Meron nga akong bagong natutunan na term, no, Gab, yung splinternet. No? I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's actually this new phenomenon that internet governance stakeholders are being concerned of, no, which is related to the fragmentation of people, the fragmentation of stakeholders, na kanya-kanya na lang tayo ng ng pag-solve, no, splinter net yung tawag. And we need to address that. We need to double down on the multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approach. And definitely yung mga content creators, yung mga influencers, we have to embrace yung we have to embrace yung alternative non-mainstream character ng influencers, and at the same time kailangan ma-harness din natin yung kumbaga organic creativity nila na maaring doon tayo nagkukulang bilang mga MIL organization. So definitely organizing programs like this can be two-way street, no, na hindi lang influencers halimbawa yung natututo, they themselves can actually contribute to the conversation.
Thanks, Marlon. Let's pull one question from our audience. So this question comes from one of our most active members. No, kanina pa siya nagtatanong sa lahat ng mga speakers, si Carlo Miguel. So his question is, how can we help the indigenous groups and other marginalized groups to safely engage in knowing and understanding MIL?
Thank you, Carlo. Siguro yung pinaka-unique sa mga kapatid natin na IPs is yung recognition nila sa indigenous ways of living, indigenous ways of learning. And for example, for us sa Out of the Box or other MIL organizations like Break the Fake or Yabong earlier, very important that we approach this challenge or approach this need from a perspective where we actually understand kung ano yung situation nila. Ano yung media literacy practices nila to begin with. Of course, magsisimula yon sa ano bang klase ng media yung kinokonsume nila at available sa kanila. No? At syempre, we shouldn't be generalizing at all kasi kahit naman yung mga IPs natin ay iba't iba rin yung kanilang mga karanasan at conditions in life, no? But I think that's always the first thing that is always asked when it comes to reaching out or developing media literacy programs for indigenous peoples. Ano ba yung na-access nila na klase ng media? At lagi kasi tayong merong ganong distinction na pag digital, pag may internet access, mas angat ka versus kapag ang access mo lang ay radyo o television or dyaryo, which shouldn't be the case, no? Which should not be the case at all. These are totally different, yeah. I mean, not totally, but different genres of communication of media. pero meron silang distinct na nai-offer dun sa mga gumagamit sa kanila. So very important na when we design a program, a media literacy intervention that involves indigenous peoples, for example, or marginalized groups, we should know kung saan sila nanggagaling, and we should experiment with approaches where we can actually build on their unique knowledge, unique experiences, at doon manggagaling yung ating education, at hindi necessarily from, say, an outsider who is expert, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Marlon. Very helpful. Very consultative din yung approach mo, no? Just to give you guys a case study, what we did also with the Mangyan community in Occidental Mindoro, we did a digital literacy education program for them. The initial intervention we did was really partnership with the local government. So because it was in consultation with them, of course, we need to consult what's the best process in running a media intervention program for the Mangyan community. We had to really do a proper consultation. We were able to do the activity safely and seamlessly. So I think you guys can also replicate that same model. Another question, Marlon, coming from Ted Aldwin Ong. What about those influencers who have no activism grounding but are online for livelihood purposes like commercial blogging or sponsored content creators?
Right. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Ted, sa tanong na to, no? Pero meron akong hinahanap na element dun sa tanong, no? Kasi ang tanong is, what about them? Are we going, ang assumption ko tuloy, ang question ba is, are we going to just let them be? Or how can we engage them? Kasi it can be either of the two, no? I think this has always been the challenge or the mission for many scholars of participatory culture and civic media literacies, no? Paano natin mabibridge yung space para um, sa mga ordinary digital media users na wala necessarily activism background, or they don't really see themselves as actively participating, say, in public discourse, but they just want to, just become fans, for example. No? Lahat ng napakalaking K-pop fandoms. Pero ang dami ring pag-aaral na kung saan itong mga K-pop fandoms, for example, actually go beyond what is expected from them, no? Na hindi lang sila bumibili ng fan merch at sumisigaw sa mga concert. Many of these fandoms, fan groups also support certain advocacies, for example, no? Lahat ng mga BTS army, since BTS became, I think, UNESCO ambassadors or UN ambassadors, many fans of BTS started to also organize, say, tree planting programs, donation drives that relate to whatever advocacy. And we've seen this in many different scenarios. But again, we're just talking about anecdotes, stories. Perhaps the question is there a way to really scale this and to see wherein all people engaged online really have a high level of political awareness, for example, or political literacy. So I guess ang makikita natin dito, dapat dapat intersectional siya, no? Na when we try to teach media literacy, dapat nahaluan natin siya, or na i-intersect tayo ng political literacy, cultural literacy, so that we can further mainstream yung iba't ibang advocacies that are worth talking about. Kasi totoo naman na ang default talaga, or ang baseline when we go online, especially because of the surveillance capitalism model of the digital world, yun talaga yung isa sa nagiging major motivation ng tao who professionalize yung kanilang digital content creation. Talagang to get money from it. And again, wala naman tayo nakikitang masama doon, no? Pero I think ang important na mangyari is for us working in the civil society sector, we make more efforts na mas maging intersectional yung approach.
Thank you, Marlon. Actually, gusto ko yung sinabi mo about the digital surveillance and also the existence of the digital media, no? I want to point out the idea of check and balances. Like, I think there's always a natural check and balance with the way content creators and influencers exist in the field. Kasi they say that the only way you can get the clout and the fans, obviously, is for you to be radically extreme in what you want or what you are supporting or what you're trying to actually promote. There was a time, sometime around like a couple of months ago, at the peak of the elections, no, na influencers are very active in, supporting politicians. But of course, there was also some influencers who chose to be neutral. They didn't have any political inkling or affinity. And it became an inflection point for some of their supporters and followers that, okay, I like this person for this cultural appropriation or for any other factors. But because politics is so important for me, I cannot afford to support someone who doesn't have any political affinity at all. So that has become the political nuance there, or like the realization in the side of the followers that there's also check and balance somehow. And so this influencer is also losing followers in the end as well if they don't actually become more involved on the ground in terms of like activism, if they just focus on profits and really getting a lot of like being very commercial with what they do. So I think naturally check and balance will exist, and that's the beauty of media because it's also self-corrective. So there's a lot of factors to take into account in this media ecosystem. And of course, in terms of the foundations, Marlon has given us a lot of insights about this introduction to media and information literacy. So thank you so much, Marlon, for sparing us your time this Saturday afternoon. We know you're so busy with a lot of your engagement. So before you go, let's flash the certificate of appreciation to Marlon Nombrado, Tech Team. Okay, the certificate of appreciation is given to Marlon Nombrado for sharing his invaluable knowledge and expertise on the introduction to media and information literacy during the Media Civics Lab live masterclass on December 10, 2022, given the same day in Manila, Philippines, and signed by yours truly, the founder of Break the Fake movement. Thank you so much, Marlon, for sharing your insights. And to everybody here,
Thank
content
you.
creators and followers, please follow Out of the Box Media Literacy Initiative. Follow them in their social media accounts. See you around, Marlon.
Thank you very much, Gab, and thank you everyone. Hi, Kimi. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that wraps up our second live masterclass for the Media Civics Lab Fact Checking Academy on media and information literacy. So far, we have already talked about 2 topics. Last week, we have talked about responsible digital citizenship with Chard Amazona and Janet Doral. And today we have also discussed 3 topics. We've talked about introduction to media literacy, copyright, public domain, and fair use. And of course, navigating through the highly evolving and changing media landscape here in the Philippines. Next week, we are going to talk about the very last part of our session, our live masterclass for this year. We are going to talk about fake news and disinformation and misinformation. A lot of concepts about that particular area that we really have to talk about. How exactly does disinformation play out in the current media ecosystem? What are the different fact-checking methodologies and channels that we have to know? And who are the key actors that are involved in the network propaganda of this information ecosystem? So we will all unlock the answers to those questions on December 17. So please don't leave us, guys. Join us the last session for this year for the live masterclass of the Media Civics Lab Fact Checking Academy. Also, we will be sending a copy of the recording to all those people who have missed this session today, the live masterclass. And if you guys want to review this masterclass, feel free to expect that email that will be coming from us. Paolo will send it over via Viber as well, and as well as the Messenger group. So make sure that you are part of the Facebook group as well for all our major announcements. And lastly, and most importantly, make sure that you guys are tuned in to the program related updates. After the live masterclass, we will be doing the influencers bootcamp already. So I hope that you guys will actually actively participate even more and watch out for the influencers bootcamp, where we will be learning about how to create fact-checking videos and produce multimedia content about this information. Again, my name is Gab. I'm the founder and president of Creative Fake Movement and the program manager of the Academy. Answer the post test so we can evaluate your learning, and of course, answer as well the evaluation form. Enjoy the rest of the Saturday and the weekend, and thank you so much. See you next week.